Good afternoon, and welcome to the Leadership Institute's live webinar series. I'm your host, Steven Rowe. Today, we will be covering an amazing webinar topic, and that is the 4 Ps of excellence. While we're doing this webinar, we encourage you to submit your questions, and you can do that 2 ways. The first way that you can do it is by emailing us at live@leadershipinstitute.org, and the other way is to tweet at us on Twitter using the hashtag LIWebinar. Our guest today is going to be Steve Sutton. Steve Sutton is the Vice President of Development here at the Leadership Institute and is known a little bit about a startup specialist, and he has been a Chief of Staff for over 14 years, so we are blessed to have him here in the studio with us today. Without further ado, Steve, how's it going?
It's going great. How you doing?
Awesome, doing great. Give us a little bit more background about yourself. Tell us what you do in about 2 sentences or less.
Well, I work here at the Leadership Institute. I'm Vice President of Development, so I help raise the money to fuel the institute. And prior to that, I came on board as Vice President of Programs, and a few years into that, Morton Blackwell asked me to move over to development. And prior to that, as you mentioned, I was a Chief of Staff on Capitol Hill for 14 years and worked for 4 different freshman members of Congress, helped start up their offices. And prior to that, a few things, but among them serving 8 years in the Navy as a junior naval officer, sailing the 7 seas, making the world safe for freedom and democracy in the American way.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome, and thank you for your service.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely. So let's get into this. The 4 Ps of excellence. Okay.
Right.
So what are these 4 Ps? And
well, I guess perhaps it's my background in the military. I need structure. I need organization, and I need it spoon-fed to me a little bit. So I thought of a way to share with people starting out, especially in their careers, the 4 Ps of excellence, and those Ps are philosophical.
Okay.
Yes, it begins with a P. Philosophical, political, personal, and professional. And I think those 4 areas encompass the majority, if not everything, of areas that you need to pay attention to truly be excellent in whatever you choose to do, your profession, but also your personal life. That's why we address that a little bit. And so I began speaking to the 4 Ps to some of the intern workshops that we conduct here at the Leadership Institute. And it seemed to clarify for many some areas that they maybe don't pay attention to. They tend to focus on 1 or 2, and to the detriment of the others, parts of their life. I think it's important that people have a balance. It shouldn't be politics all the time, or public policy all the time, or any one area. I think you need a balance, and I think the 4 Ps gives a structure to explain why it's important and how to do it.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And again, the 4 Ps are philosophical,
right?
Which does start with the P.
Yes, it
and
does.
Then we've got political,
right,
personal, and professional.
Right.
That's awesome. Okay, well, let's break this down a little bit.
Okay.
Could you go into just a tad bit on the philosophical? And there might be something that the Leadership Institute might be able to provide to people, or
sure,
what would you recommend in that specific area?
Well, as conservatives, people involved in public policy, they don't have to typically be reminded to be engaged in not just the philosophy, but the issues, the why behind the issues. That tends to be where people start. So that's the easy one, because that's the one that everyone tends to be focused on to begin with. And so, but I've found, and at the Leadership Institute, we have a career services department that helps people with their resumes and with job interview skills and salary negotiation, and also helps people to get jobs in the conservative movement through the website conservativejobs.com, which is available. And but we do mock interviews with hundreds of young people every year, and I've found in the ones that I've done, too many people are philosophically thin. You can ask somebody, so what's your most important issue?
Yep.
And whatever they say, well, great, tell me about that. Why? Well, my parents were that, so that's what I am. Well, that's not kind of good enough for me, and likely not to be good enough in a job interview or in any other situation. What are the top 3 issues within that issue?
Yep.
What's going on now in that issue? And on the most important issue to you, you would think people would be able to speak to that, and yet well, I'm not really sure, and if it's, is there a current court case? What's now, it shifts, it changes. If you're pro-life, for example, you should know what's going on with Planned Parenthood right now and that controversy. And if you don't, it makes me wonder how important that issue really is to you when you're not as engaged as perhaps you should be. So we just want to encourage people to dig a little deeper and to understand the underpinnings and the philosophy of the issues so they can give a spirited defense when the time comes for them to do so.
Oh, and the time always comes.
That's right, it does.
Yeah, always. So a little bit more on the personal level now. I know how does one engage themselves a lot more on the personal level to truly achieve excellence?
It's a great question because often we're so occupied in our professional lives and engaged in public policy, and this is true in any profession though, you can overdo it to the detriment of your own personal well-being, that would be health, but also your financial well-being, for example. I mean, as political operatives or public policy people, unless you're getting a job in government and with a retirement plan, if you're a gypsy and you're drifting from one campaign to the next every 2 years, or one public policy job or one nonprofit job to the next, you may not have a retirement plan, for example. Well, you owe it to yourself to do that. I have too many friends who, after 20 years of toiling in the fields of conservatism, have no savings, they have no retirement plans, and then they're 45 years old and they're kind of behind the 8 ball. And I want to encourage young people not to do that. So I think you have a personal responsibility to yourself first and to your family. It also then has an impact. I know there are many people who would like to do a campaign, but because of family obligations, financial and otherwise, they feel they can't. Well, but if you've taken care of some of these things in your personal life, then maybe you do have the freedom. You've saved up money, you have a retirement plan, and you can go and do a campaign for 3 months or 6 months at less detriment to your personal well-being. And so it involves health and exercising and eating right. I know I should do more of that too. And your personal finances, your retirement, and family. It includes religion and your personal, your moral health as well. These are things that you should take care of and at least plan for a better life, and therefore a more effective conservative.
Oh, an extremely more effective conservative.
Right.
So as they've started to develop themselves on a personal level, I'm sure that bleeds a little bit more into a professional level. How does one start to achieve that excellence in the professional realm as well?
Oh, and that's a good point. These do bleed into each other, so they're not as easily siloed maybe, but it works, I think. But professionally, some of that bleeds into personal. But as a professional, you could be philosophically outstanding and you could be a great political operative. But if you don't dress well, if you don't have personal hygiene in a professional setting, if you're not in tune with some of the office politics, for example, and you need to learn to speak well, you need to learn to write well. I can't tell you how many people lose out on jobs they're otherwise qualified for because they write poorly. And there was a time when I worked on the Hill that I decided as a chief of staff, I would joke that we're the highest paid proofreaders. That's our job. We spend a lot of time, and in some situations we're the highest paid babysitters. But and so I actually took a personal pledge not to hire anyone unless they had majored in English in the office that I was working. And the next 3 people I hired were all English majors, because I was tired of being the only person that could write to my and to the constituents level of, I mean, you don't want misspelled things going out on the congressman's signature. Yep. And so I hired a press secretary who was an English major. That's an easy one. But I hired a scheduler who was an English major. And then I hired someone at our front desk who was an English major. And now I had some reinforcements. And so I told the rest of the staff, get things approved through them first, just for English, before they even get to me for content and style and tone. And that worked out very well. And I think all three eventually became chiefs of staff.
Wow.
By the way.
That is awesome.
And so that's, I guess 2 out of the 3 became chiefs of staff. So it was more than just being an English major. But I encourage people, if you're majoring in English, your parents may say, don't do that. That's not a bad thing to do. Or minor in English. Mm-hmm. And people need to be self-aware. If you don't write well, don't consider it a weakness that I can overcome through other strengths. Take a writing class and develop at least some minimal talent. Because if you need to write for a job, they are likely not to take writing samples that can be edited and improved by a committee of your colleagues. They may say, sit down and write something right now. And if not, within the first 2 weeks, they're going to realize you don't write well. And it's not going to be a good start. Learn to write reasonably well, and it will help you in your profession. Whether that's personal or professional, I'll leave it. It's one of the P's. But I think to be professional, you need to learn to speak reasonably well, but also to write well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. They're probably, as you said, intermarried.
Right. And spelling's important. For example, you spell your first name incorrectly.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
And so you need to change. You need to learn it's with a V and not a PH.
Well, I don't know. PH is definitely the way to go. We have Saint Stephen. With the PH, it's got to be the way it's done.
So are you suggesting that maybe I should be? I should. Well, I'll take a look at it. I'll be open-minded.
Yep. We can agree to disagree a little bit here.
That's fine.
In the end, we're both Steves, so
that's
it's great.
Right. We kind of have a den of Steves here right
so
now.
Many Steves. That's awesome. Well, I guess every Steve that I've met has been a great person. But kind of coming back to the main topic here. So we talked about 3 of them, but I guess the one that fires me up in the morning, and I'm sure most people, is the political area of being exceptional. Mm-hmm. And how do you advance that?
Being political, it's not just working on a campaign, or people think politics, they think campaigns. And that's not really the focus for me. That's a part, it's interesting, it's a good talent to have if you're in public policy, to be familiar with campaigns. If nothing else, so you'll know all the erroneous things being said on cable TV 24 hours a day. It's astonishing to me that these talking heads have never run a campaign, or they've run them and lost everyone, or they just don't know what they're talking about.
They're experts, though.
But you got to fill some airtime. Let's put some people on. And in all fairness, sometimes you don't want to be completely honest if you're a pundit or if you're involved in a campaign, because you don't want to air your warts, I suppose. So there's a lot of spinning going on. But anyway, I'm talking about the politics of public policy, getting things passed. On Capitol Hill, you can come at the profession or a job on the Hill from one of 2 ways. It's from policy or politics. Mm-hmm. Now, my background's politics. I've worked in campaigns, but there are people who are more issue-oriented. It's not that I ignore issues and don't care about them, but I want to fix the politics, and I want to get good people elected so we can do the policy. But some people are more policy focused. That's fine. You need them as well. They typically become the legislative assistants and directors and potentially chiefs of staff. But you're going to come at jobs on the Hill through one or the other. It's going to be primarily, again, these overlap, but primarily you'll be coming at a job through public policy and the issue, or you'll be coming at it through campaigns and politics. And I think you add a layer to your qualifications and your excellence and your personal development if you understand the political process. So then it's not just, why can't we just pass this legislation? Everyone would agree. Unless the politics are right, the policy doesn't get done. And that's the problem that we have often. We could all sit in a room and agree of this policy, but then that it's 95% approval rating or 99% approval. But then in trying to get it passed, both sides are going to hold that hostage for the more political things that they want, policy things, but more controversial things. And so in order to pass legislation, people just need to understand the politics have to match up to the policy, and lightning has to strike. And so Bill Clinton's going to veto welfare reform twice because the politics weren't right. And he got so much criticism, his advisor at the time, Dick Morris, said, you've got to sign this thing. So they changed puppy to small dog, and they put in a comma here or took out a comma there, which actually can change legislation quite a bit. But, and then suddenly it was a new bill, and they addressed my concerns, and it was the same bill. And Clinton signed it, but on the third try, he vetoed it twice before. So the politics caught up to the policy, and some good legislation was passed. And that's why Keystone Pipeline is not going to get signed, in my view, under this president, because the politics don't match up. It doesn't matter why can't the president understand that it actually helps the environment not to have trucks taking the oil from the oil sands in trucks to the West Coast and putting them on ships and sending it to countries that don't have the same environmental standards? A pipeline saves the fuel of the trucks. It will actually help the environment. He's not a stupid man. He knows this. If someone could only explain to him, no, it doesn't work that way. It's the politics. And he doesn't want to upset the base, because that's pretty much all he has left when your favorables start to crash down into the low 40s. You're not going to upset the entire environmental movement. He's not going to approve Keystone. And Hillary's not taking a position on it until she wins or loses the presidency. She's just not going to. Why can't she? It's not going to happen because the politics. So my point is that if you understand the politics behind the policies, you're going to be a more effective policy advocate for your boss. If you're working on the Hill or in a nonprofit or an NGO, a think tank, it adds a layer that some people who are only issue focused don't have. So if you have the issues and in addition understand the politics behind it, and can add that layer to a boss. We had a young man who interviewed with Ted Cruz for a job in his office. And they asked him, how would you approach this issue? He gave a political answer and said, well, the issue we can all agree, but it's how do you structure the messaging and the theme and then run a political campaign to get this passed? And when they were so impressed with that answer, because everyone always talks about the issue, I don't think some of the people interviewing him had really considered that. Well, he got the job, and he's in Senator Cruz's office now, and adding value to that office because of that layer that he's able to bring. And I think that makes it will help you in interviews, and it'll help you when you get the jobs. And so I just think it's too many issue-oriented people ignore the political part of this. And I'm not talking about elective campaigns for elective office. People think that's what it means. Well, I don't want to do politics. If you want to do public policy, you are going to be doing politics. And unless you're just going to be in a silo at a think tank, which you might be. But I think we suffer because the other side's doing politics all the time. And have the famous saying that that governing is politics by other means. But Bush 1, George Herbert Walker, I think believed that politics is what you do for campaigns. He used to famously say, I'm in campaign mode now. And it was something he just needed to get through so he could win, so he could govern. And that's why he looked at his watch during his re-election at one of the debates. Is this over yet? Because he wasn't enjoying the politics of it, and he wanted to get to the policy of it. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Especially in debates.
Well, sure. And so he wasn't wearing a watch in the next debate, I venture to say. So.
Oh, I'm sure.
And that's what we do at Leadership Institute. We don't do issues for the most part. We're doing the politics of the issue. We're teaching people how to become more technically proficient, whether it's on the air with communications training and debate preps and public speaking, or it's campaigns. But everything is, just to make you a more effective person, is to learn those political techniques that Morton says are philosophically neutral. Both sides can use them. And so I think that's what we spend our time doing here. And it's very important that people understand that layer of the 4 Ps. And so I spend a lot of time talking about that in the intern workshop to explain it's not campaigns, it's the other stuff.
Oh, 100%. Awesome. So let's say that I haven't taken your conservative intern workshop. I'm listening to this webinar now, and I want to start developing myself in all four of these areas. I mean, they're all equally important.
Right.
But where should I start? Where's the beginning point?
That's another great question. We can kind of go through all four, I suppose. Morton has taught us that there's basically two ways to learn anything. There's through the experience of others, and then there's through your own experience, the school of hard knocks. And Morton points out that the problem with the school of hard knocks is that by the time you learn enough to graduate from that school, you're too old for it to make a real difference in your life. And so the best way to learn is through the experience of others. Now that takes some self-awareness. And by the way, there are many people who never graduate from the school of hard knocks because they keep banging their head against the wall.
Yeah, too many knuckle sandwiches.
And they don't learn the lessons. So they make the same mistakes over and over again until they're 60 years old, or they're just too old, and they're just not going to change. Okay, that's fine. But even people who are learning through the school of hard knocks, it's a hard way to succeed. So learning from the experience of others, that requires mentors. People have asked, how many mentors should I have? Or they think they should have one mentor. You should have dozens of mentors. When you read someone's book on a subject, they've become a mentor to you. You should have mentors in all different areas of your life. In your personal life, you should have mentors. They could be members of the clergy, members of the family, close friends. You need support systems. In your professional life, people think of mentors in that terms, but there should be all sorts of mentors. So when it comes to, we'll go through the philosophy, get better grounded in why you believe what you believe and what it means to be a conservative. The Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI, has wonderful books. And they have a whole series of very short books that you can read because of the attention span of many of our young people today. But they have scores of publications and they're not the only ones. And membership for college students is free in ISI. You just sign up. We actually hand out sign-up sheets for ISI membership at many of our schools, particularly the Youth Leadership School, that focus on college students, and just sign up free. So I would encourage people to join ISI. That's a step. Heritage Foundation and other think tanks. I was lecturing just yesterday, and we were talking about how do you reach out to people on certain issues, and we talked about the class warfare of the left. And I said, just go back to the luxury tax, which was passed several decades ago. They passed a tax on luxury items, on airplanes and fancy cars and luxury boats, so-called luxury boats. The definition was a dollar amount.
Yep.
On the assumption that rich people have to buy these toys, and if you have a surtax on the rich, that can fund government and will raise X dollars. And conservatives said this is not going to work. It's going to cost working jobs, blue-collar jobs. They passed it. All the predictions of conservatives came true. They repealed it. The person who led the repeal was Patrick Kennedy from Rhode Island, a congressman from Rhode Island, because it decimated the shipbuilding industry and his constituents. But the point that I was making was learn about that so that you can share the lesson. We've already tried that. So when the left tries to talk about tax the rich and let's do these things, we can point to Detroit, where it's been done. We can point to the luxury tax, where it was repealed, and the charge to repeal it was led by liberal Democrats in many cases. And but Heritage has position papers on this. I mean, you need to learn, get the position paper that Heritage did on the luxury tax, the post-mortem on the luxury tax, and read through it so that you've got your facts. We don't have to overstate, exaggerate, be bombastic. We just have to state the facts and learn about the alternative minimum tax and how the people who vote to raise the alternative minimum tax so it doesn't affect as many people each year are liberal Democrats from the inner cities whose constituents are most affected by not being allowed to deduct state and local taxes from their income tax. The left can't even win a 96 versus 4% argument because they've got liberal Democrats representing Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, who lead the fight to repeal or exempt the alternative minimum tax every year. We should be, but you've got to understand that. And Heritage does a great study by congressional district of who's affected by the AMT. And so read those things. So get better at defending your philosophy and why liberal policies not only fail, but make problems worse.
Yep.
If we're trying to help people, let's not do them more harm. And so get more knowledgeable about the issues that we're fighting for. So that's on the philosophy end of things. And yes, have some geeky think tank guy be your mentor when it comes to philosophy stuff. Sure.
Oh, they're on it.
Yeah. There's so much information out there now. So there's no excuse other than you not doing it not to be philosophically sound or more sound.
Yep, definitely.
On the personal level, it's family, it's faith, it's your infrastructure of your support network. And those are your mentors. They can be parents, clergy, other people, siblings, friends. Those can all be mentors. I've got three teenagers. One just rolled over to 20, so I can't say three teenagers. But I have three youngsters at home. And who you hang out will determine, in large part, what you're listening to. Who your friends are will determine the type of person you are. If you're hanging out with bad people, you're going to get into trouble. And so you should, and they all hang out with great people, so it's a good thing. But I see people who hang out with bad people and then bad things happen to them, and they're wondering, why does this happen? So surround yourself with people that you want to emulate. And friends can be mentors, and should be. And that's on the personal level. On the professional level, same thing. There are people that you will meet with and admire, develop relationships with those people, and have them be your one-on-one mentor for the rest of your life, but develop a mentorship professionally with different people. Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years? What type of profession? That can change, but as of right now, what do you think you want to do? And then seek out some people that can give you advice. The advice may be, you don't want to do this. You're not cut out for it, or it's not really what you want to do. And that's how you grow. And then, of course, politically, you just need people who will mentor you through the politics of things. And you'll find them at the Leadership Institute, because when you take a class here, we now have a future candidate school going on right now. And by the end of the week, you'll have heard from 30 people. And we give out their contact information and make them mentors in whatever area. You want to do fundraising, then develop a mentorship. You'll end up doing an internship with that person, or getting an entry-level job with that person, or being placed in a campaign to do that job by that person. It opens up a world to you if you think in those terms. But don't just say, well, I'm going to do it on my own. See, as conservatives, we're individuals, and we believe in individualism. We're rugged individuals, and we're going to do it on our own. And there's certainly something to be said for that. But I don't want this to become a, it takes a village speech.
Oh no, it takes a family. But
it does take a family. That's Rick Santorum's book, and the larger family that you create for yourself. And my parents grew up in relatively poor New York City. My dad had a tough upbringing. He had to develop his own infrastructure because he didn't have it in his family. And so, but he realized that. So he was smart enough to understand that if I keep myself in this silo that I'm born into, I'm going to have a really tough time. So I need to make that silo larger through my friends and their families, and which is how he ended up marrying my mom. And my mother's family, they didn't adopt him, but when there was no food in the house, he would call over and say, there's no food. And they're saying, well, fix yourself something. No, there's no food. Well, open up the cupboard, and you don't understand.
Zero.
There is no food in my house. And they'd say, come on over. And they were poor too, but we've got food. All right, so it's spaghetti and ketchup.
Yep.
I hate spaghetti and ketchup. Don't serve it to me. Ketchup is not a substitute for tomato sauce. But my dad grew up on that.
Yep.
And I had several of those meals as well. Doesn't taste good. Not a good thing.
Fair enough.
But so my father understood he needed to expand his network beyond the one that he was born into, if you will. And there are America's plenty of people want to help.
Oh, yes.
People will reach out to you and they will help you. And even if your circumstances aren't that dire, people want to help people. Even conservatives do.
Mm-hmm. I'd say especially
that's
conservatives.
That's right. The myth of the left about
myth.
Conservatives, because we do care and want to help people. And one little wrinkle to this is, sure, you can ask people to help you. You help somebody else, and then you're developing it. But asking someone else to help you actually is a better way, because once someone's done something for you, now they're vested in your success. Mm-hmm. This is why when you get into a college, if you get into Harvard, you're never not going to graduate. They won't let you, because then that's an admission that their admissions office maybe didn't do a good enough job. If the hardest part about Harvard is getting in, it's not graduating. And many colleges are like that. The toughest part's getting in. They don't want you to fail, because their success rates go down. People start saying, what's the admissions office doing, allowing all these people in, and they're not graduating. Now, not every college is like that, but many of them are. And so there's a whole infrastructure to make sure you graduate. It may not be in 4 years, but they're going to really encourage that. Mm-hmm. And so build that up yourself. Understand that when you ask someone to do you a favor, they're now vested in your success, and they want to see you succeed, and they're more likely to do you another favor and another favor, because now they've invested in you, and that investment they want to pay off.
Oh, well, that is awesome. And kind of going back to your alternative minimum tax, I remember it used to be the 96 versus the 4%, the top 4%, and now it's the 99 versus the 1%, because they were running that argument.
The left can't even win the 99 versus 1.
Oh, I know.
They really can't.
Yeah.
Occupy Wall Street. The problem with Occupy Wall Street is that there are cameras everywhere.
Yes.
And once you see the occupiers, this is why the press didn't want to report on site, because you realize what a freak show that is. Mm-hmm. It was just terrible. That's the 99%. They don't speak for me, so that kind of fizzled. Mm-hmm. I think
very quickly.
And so class warfare doesn't work in America. Very quickly, George McGovern spoke to a group in 1972, running for president, of union workers, and after his speech, mingling with them, asked, "What'd you think?" "Well, we're not going to vote for you." "Why not?" "We don't like your policy of taxing the rich." Taxing the top, at the time, I think it was $100,000 or above. Incredulous, McGovern said, "Why not? You don't make that much," thinking that's what it's about. And they said, "Yes, but someday we hope our children will." And that's the problem of the left, is they will always point out Paris Hilton, but they won't point out Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very simple thing for us to do. This is why they can't win fights on the estate tax, quite frankly. Because it's viewed by too many as just unfair. Their position actually is the children don't need it and they don't deserve it. That's direct quotes from Barack Obama when he was a senator. And he tried to call it the Paris Hilton tax giveaway. And yet people are realizing, well, the government doesn't really deserve it. What did they do to deserve it? And they don't really need it, given all the waste that we have. And but that's just the diversionary side. That's
a good side story.
That's right.
But I've got a question coming in from the audience.
Sure.
This individual
maybe they can get us back on track.
Yeah, hopefully somehow we'll get there. But this person's asking about more the personal component. They want to know how they can build themselves a personal brand. Mm-hmm. And
that's a great question.
Yeah. Moreover, how that translates over into the professional realm.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is where the things do overlap.
Yep.
Well, the most important thing on the personal brand is that you have a brand worth promoting. It starts with you. And so that's where it starts. If you are personally excellent or have areas of expertise, then you can start to think in terms of building a brand, because you'll have something to sell, if you will. The biggest problem with people who want to brand themselves is that they're not brandable. They don't have much to offer. Everyone wants to have their own blog, and everybody wants to be a celebrity, or you have to have something of value. The best book on networking and building your personal brand that I've read is Never Eat Alone.
Ooh, that is a good one.
And it's funny that all these self-help books, the best ones, are all written by liberal Democrats, and this is true of that. So buy it through Amazon on the secondary market, so the guy doesn't get an extra few bucks. But it's a great book about personal branding, and I won't review the book, but I think that's a good one. But that's what it's about. It's networking on steroids. He suggests having dinner parties for people and bringing different groups to the dinner party, and he goes into great detail on how to do that and creating that personal brand and that network that ever expands by bringing interesting people together. And when you start doing that, then you have something of value. And so someone's going to come to you, hey, I'm trying to market something. Do you know somebody that I can meet? Oh yeah, I got a guy. That knowledge, that's what Shark Tank is all about.
Yep.
Watch Shark Tank on CNBC every night. You know, it's an interesting show because what people are willing to do as entrepreneurs is give up chunks of their company for the knowledge that the Shark Tank people have, that those entrepreneurs have, the networks that they have. You have to pay for that. And so the question is, how much do you pay? I've got this great idea. It's why Ayn Rand thought that the most important job in a free enterprise system was the entrepreneur, not the inventor. The inventor in a silo invents and the market never comes to fruition. You're John Galt then, you know,
Yeah.
inventing
Who
the
John
engine,
Galt?
inventing the engine, but it doesn't come to market. It's the entrepreneur that sees an invention and understands how they can apply it in such a way to help millions of people. That's the entrepreneur. And that's what the Shark Tank does. It takes the invention to the entrepreneurial stage. And that's, as a person who is trying to build your brand, you have to develop a product. The product may be you, but you have to develop the expertise, and then you need the entrepreneurship to bring that to market, so to speak. And the best book, in my view, on that is Never Eat Alone. And I forget the author, but and that's how I think you can build your brand, and that takes you then into your professional life.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
We've got one more question on the from this gentleman, and he answered me. I mean, questioned me twice.
A follow-up question from the same person?
Got a follow-up question.
Well,
I'm gonna put it out there.
When you don't have any more questions, I guess we have to go there.
Yeah, no, I just feel like we can get to both of his questions.
That's fine.
No, but he asked a second component in the personal part. How personal can you be in a professional setting?
Another great question. See, now I want to meet that person.
He's a good guy. He's asking the good questions.
Okay, so if I don't know who you are, call me. See that? You just made a mentor. I'm impressed by your questions. It's just that easy. So I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah, of course. It's
how personal can you be in professional life?
Yep.
More than people think. Now you don't have to be inviting your boss over to dinner every night, but most professional situations bleed over into the personal because it's personal relationships. And that's something that we don't do as well as the left does, particularly in public policy. Politics, public policy is a people business. Maybe that should be the fifth P. It's a people business. And that's why sometimes our activists and candidates are charismatically challenged and have a hard time relating to other people. Their philosophy is to leave me alone. Grover Norquist wrote a great book, and he describes the Leave Us Alone Coalition. But we have to understand that politics is a personal business, and the left really understands that better. And that's why we don't relate to people. We talk about deficits, and we don't talk about the impact on people. We talk about tax policy in rural areas to bring jobs and manufacturing jobs. Well, we don't talk about the personal cost where the liberal policies are not destroying jobs. They are, but they're destroying communities. Even more importantly, they're destroying families. When people have to move in order to raise their children, grandparents don't see their grandchildren at best but for once a year. The liberal policies destroy families. And that's how we should be talking about these policies. They don't just destroy jobs. That's a little bit too silo and a little bit... And so to tie that back, though, in your professional relationships, you're building personal relationships. I'm doing fundraising now for the Leadership Institute. It's all about personal relationships. A person wants to know before they donate, can they trust the organization? Does the president of the organization have the personal integrity that they want to see before they make a large gift? Because they don't know exactly how it'll be spent. They want to trust the organization and the president and the people involved that they'll be making the right decisions, they'll be making ethical decisions, and treat that money with respect and the integrity that in which it was donated and in which it was earned. Well, that's a very personal process. So I think it's impossible to separate the personal from the professional. And I think that we silo the professional too much, particularly as conservatives. And so develop the personal relationships. It's related.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, especially coming from both components of personal and professional. I mean, it is true how married the two are.
Right. Which is why public policy and politics are also related.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
In the same way, I think.
Yep, definitely. So we have a question from a different individual this
time. A different person,
yes,
okay.
I do answer other questions.
It's a high standard now.
Yeah,
the bar's high.
It is high.
I hope the second person is as good as that first person.
Well, they hope to be.
Did you tell someone to submit those two questions and the first person's really you?
Oh, no, I wish.
Is that what you're telling? Is that true?
But this individual is a little bit younger. She is trying to get an internship here in Washington, D.C., and she wants to...
Is this one of my daughters?
Oh,
no,
oh man. Well,
no,
maybe. I don't know. Okay.
No,
all right.
They don't want to work for me here.
No, fair enough.
They get enough of me at home.
Yeah.
That's the old joke when the child asks the mother a question, and the mother says, "Why don't you ask your dad?" And the child says, "I don't want to know that much about it."
Just want the synopsis, not the whole book review. Yep, makes sense. But this woman wants to get an internship here in D.C.
Okay.
And she wants to know what you would recommend in terms of a professional level of where she wants to be in terms of her resume.
Right. That's a good generic question, but it comes with specific answers. Depends on where she wants to intern. If it's a congressional office, there's certain connections and like I know of people who have joined the Capitol Hill softball leagues during the summer, because a lot of congressional staffers are on those, and the congressional staffs are too small to create their own softball team, because the average is 8 people in a congressional office,
Yep.
and many of them aren't playing softball. So the office will start a team, but they'll need to supplement it, and they kind of look for people. And there are people who will join the softball team to develop the personal relationships to then develop into professional relationships. That's pretty clever. So does she bat right or left-handed, I guess is the question.
I'll have to ask.
But wherever you're trying, is it a think tank? Is it at LI? Is it on the Hill? Those are all going to require different plans. But develop a plan, a very specific plan. I had a young lady who wanted to be a legislative assistant, and she didn't know how to do that. And so she was waiting tables at Tortilla Coast, for goodness sake. So somebody introduced us. I gave her a job at the front desk in our office. I said, that's all I've got. My LAs aren't moving anywhere. But we developed a plan. And the plan was to go work on a campaign of someone who might get elected to Congress. So then you'd be in position, if you impress them, to be in LA. So we eliminated all incumbents, because they already have legislative assistants. And then we eliminated all challengers, because they're not going to win. Very difficult. We looked at open seats. And then we fine-tuned it further and further, and we selected a campaign for her to go volunteer on. She took her 2 weeks vacation, and she went and volunteered on that campaign. It was Rick Renzi in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
And the reason was because it was an open seat, so he didn't have a staff yet, because he's not an elected official. And he wasn't a state senator. And she went to Arizona State, so there was enough of a connection there. So she went home or slept on friends' sofas, and I cautioned her, don't party as much as you party here in Washington. And she listened, and I said, be first in the office every day, be the last one out of the office every day. For 2 weeks, you are going to be just a dynamo. You know what to do, and she did, And sure enough, about 6 weeks later, they made her an offer to be in LA, and she became in LA in an office. Now, I can't say you could thread that needle every time, but you need contacts, and it's hard to do when you're not in DC. So if the question is, how do I build the contacts in DC when I'm in Hoboken? Well, that's close enough. When I'm in Wichita, well, you've got to create a plan for that. If you're in Wichita, there's people who used to work in Washington, and now they're back in Wichita. We'll find out who they were and go to coffee and how'd you like working in DC? Is there anyone that you know I can talk to and that you can recommend that would take a look at my resume or something like that? There are people that are home on vacation that are in Wichita. There's a congressional district office in Wichita somewhere because they've got district offices. It may not be in Wichita, but in Kansas there are going to be some congressional offices. So go and build relationships with the district staff of the congressional office, and perhaps through the campaign. Not that you have to work on a campaign to get an internship in the office, but sometimes that's helpful. So you have to come up with a plan, though, and not just leave it to chance. So the first step is asking the question, but then develop the plan. Without more details, I can't give you the plan on the air here, but
it's got to be a personalized plan for them.
I think it does, sure.
It does,
but reach out, and we have people here at Leadership Institute that will help with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Contact the Career Services Office, Patty Simpson, and she'll walk you through some ideas. And right there, you've got a person in Washington if you don't already, because Patty knows tons of people.
Oh, yes, so many. And we do have an internship here also
That's
with the
true.
Leadership Institute.
Come here.
Yep, highly recommend you take that
That's right.
as an option.
Steven's in the internship program now.
Yeah, it's a fantastic one. So I have another one more question.
Sure.
I gotta cut these off. I'm sorry I can't get to all of them right now, but we're gonna try and answer one, maybe two more.
I'll answer them quickly.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes.
All right. So this next question is more back on the philosophy side of things. It's an area we haven't talked about quite a bit. They have found that a lot of philosophy comes up during those interviews. And what would you recommend in terms of philosophy to be more well-rounded?
You first and foremost, again, you need a plan.
Yep.
The plan needs to start where the philosophy that's most important to you. What are the issues that motivate you to get involved? You should become, say, expert. You're not going to get a PhD in each one, but you should be pretty conversant in those on those issues. And so, if your top issue is gun rights, well, then you should know what's the status of the current legislation, who's pushing what. What's the left trying to do with all the gun violence? Then what's the left trying to push? What's the position of the NRA, Gun Owners of America? There's so much information now about what's going on. What are the court cases that are going on right now? That's just self-education. If your number one issue is abortion, you can't study and be an expert on 50 different issues. And as far as just the root philosophy, again, you don't have to be an expert on Edmund Burke, but you should know who these people are and be somewhat conversant. So all I can say is read. Read more. You didn't get it in college, but read and be able to carry on a conversation when it comes to the philosophy of these things. You may end up being more grounded than the office holder that you want to intern with.
Yeah, you never know.
Because some of those guys aren't as grounded as they should be.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, awesome. Yep, so then we have another question going back to the personal level. They want to know how much body language, eye contact, vocal tonality leads into being more effective on a personal level. Could you speak anything to that?
Yes, there's a whole class we teach on public speaking that you should take if you're really interested in that, but it matters a lot. Stephen Klaus does a lot of lecturing for us, and I've heard him lecture. 55% of is body language on whether people are going to listen to you because you have 14 seconds to make that first impression at most. Another 30% is your tone, the quality of your voice and the tone and your attitude, and that's over 80%. It's less than 10% that is the content of what you're saying that matters to those people that are making these decisions. We teach people when you're doing TV ads, you should be able to turn the volume down on the TV ad and just the visual. A lot of people do that at home. They mute the ad, but they're watching it. The TV ad should speak for itself in just the visual medium. That's one test of a better ad than otherwise, rather than just what the words are. That suggests there should be some keywords on the bottom of whatever's being said. and so those are all the techniques, but it's very important. And in a people business, it's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. We actually got another question on this topic right now, and it's when it comes to personality, what happens if you're naturally boring and you're a naturally dull person? How do you better yourself there?
Well, again, you could try to make that into a strength. I mean, being a thoughtful conservative is not a bad place to be, and there are many elected officials who have a personality like that. We're not trying to get you to be something you're not. So we've had kind of boring elected officials, but you can rely on them. There's always a flip side. They're steady, and you can trust them, and they're reliable, and that part of your persona could come out. But don't expect to be a salesman, and if you don't have a decent personality that lends itself to that. The most important thing is enthusiasm. Well, you can still be enthusiastic about something without being charismatic. So it's not just charisma and an outgoing personality. There's other things that are also important that even a boring person can work on and elevate. Enthusiasm and dependability and other attributes. But again, without being more specific, it's hard to say. But I'm not saying that you have to be a backslapping, hand-grabbing Bill Clinton to be in politics. Or George W. Bush. He was a better personality than Al Gore, and that certainly helped him. Can a boring person win the presidency in the modern 21st century? That's the subject for a different webinar.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. We've had some boring presidents. Could they have become presidents in the age of television?
Definitely.
Well, that's an interesting discussion.
That would be an interesting one.
But I think you can be steady and thoughtful. And if I'm trying to build a team of people, I want several people that are like that. I don't want everyone being, outgoing and backslapping, because that's. So in an organization, you need different personality types, and you need that analytical, steady person as well. Doesn't mean you should only be an accountant. But there's a place for everybody in the movement. You just have to find that place.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to have to cut off the questions.
Have the 2 hours flown by that quickly?
Flown by extremely quickly. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Great job, Steven.
Oh, thank you so much. In case you want to recap anything that Steve mentioned during the webinar, most importantly, the 4 Ps of success, you're able to do that online, going to leadershipinstitute.org/activism on demand. And then you'll be able to see this webinar again, and you can slow down, rewind, fast forward to whatever you found most interesting and compelling. And also stay tuned for August 12th. It's going to be our next webinar. It's going to be Stories of Success in Direct Mail Marketing. And that's sure to be a fantastic one, especially as we continue on with these webinar series. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and hope you have a fantastic day.